Ladies and gentlemen, let's do some Puzzle Rush. Let's see if we can get to 50 today. Maybe the top score 55. I'll talk through what I'm trying to do here, talk through how you can solve it too. This one's a pretty simple one. We see we have a lot of squares blocked off. We just need to add to it. Checkmate in one, no problems. Now, in this case, we have a clear passed pawn. This is interesting tactic that you have to look for when you're queening pawns at the same time. We have a passed pawn here. White has a passed pawn here. And the way that I count these down is I say that the pawn has just crossed the halfway line with black to move, and white has just crossed the halfway line. Because that's the same number, I'm going to be queening first. So what I do is I just fast forward to having a queen and white having a queen. And I immediately see a very common tactic after mutual promotion. It's, can I just win the other guy's queen? And here I can. Well, he's not even going to try it. If he pushed, this would be a lot harder. What we would have done is come over and taken the queen. So this is a very simple one. Back rank mate. We can tell because we have the pawns here, and a lot of times in tactics we have stuff that can block, like this rook, but we'll just take it. Undefended. Yet another back rank mate. It's healthy to look and see what somebody changed about the position on the last move, and when this pawn moved, this queen move became no longer possible. So now the queen doesn't cover f1, so that's checkmate in one. Another simple one, it's just a quick checkmate. Very, very, very common type of tactic is the bump and run checkmate. You would love it if the king were on f8 and we could just checkmate in one, but we can't because it's a diagonal. When the queen is diagonal to a king, it can go one square over. However, the queen can go two squares over. And then she would go right here, checkmate. This is a back rank bump. We have a back rank formation. Unfortunately, however, there are two pieces controlling the back square, but we have two pieces attacking through the pawn to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to force the king away. We're going to bump him off the back rank, and then we're going to mate him. So I'll go here. I will take this pawn. The king will go over. I will check. Rook will take that, but I have another one. One of my favorite checkmating patterns. It's like a mini ladder. You can do this from all the way across the board, and it works when there is a queen on a file, king in the middle, and then a rook on the other side. And what we're going to do is you just simply keep this leapfrog connection to the rook. Queen moves up. You can start this all the way back here. And all you have to do is look at the same color squares all the way up the board. Dark squares, or in this case, it'll be light squares. These light squares, all the way up the board, I see that none of those are defended. However, because this is a puzzle, the dark squares are defended very heavily. One, another one here. But what we're going to do is we're going to mate on the light squares. That's what makes this puzzle fun. Here's how it works. You go queen next to the rook, and then when the king has to move back, because it's trapped between these two lines, the rook chases it down. You go like queen, and then you go rook, and then you go queen, and then you go rook, and then you go queen, and then you go rook. It's checkmate. So here we are just simply going to force the king away from the rook. This is called checking off. We are going to check the king off of guarding a piece. This is a type of tactic known as a deflection, but when it's a king, it's a check. It's very easy to see. You can take any material the king protects by just checking him away. So here we go, a check off. Mate in one. Don't need to talk about another mate in one too much. Another mate in one, same pattern. Hey, we looked at this one. Do you remember what it is? We got a battery pointing to the back rank, but there's a king there. So what do? We bump it away. Well, look at that. Same pattern, bump away. You just have to know this one. Mate in one. I wonder what we can do. We have our queen and a rook with a king touching the back rank. Well, there's a king defending that square, so there's nothing we can do. Just kidding. Back rank bump. Well, this should be quite obvious. You want to look at checks and captures. So you want to look at the piece that's doing the least amount of work that can be involved in the attack. This queen is already guarding a lot of squares around the king, so we're probably not going to use her. It's much better to use the piece that's not doing anything. Checkmate one. This one is a special type of checkmate in one. When a queen goes next to a king, it can slide sideways, but we actually see there's a bishop there. Checkmate. Okay. Same style of idea. This is a complicated pattern that everybody should know. It's very important that you know this one. This is how you can sort of maneuver a bishop around in order to create a big threat against the king. It doesn't work in this case because what we were to check this way, we have this escape square, right? Sometimes a bishop can check. When the king goes back, we pull back to usually a square like on this diagonal or something. And when the king goes back, we check it from here. The reason we can't do that here, and the reason we couldn't just do it right away, is there's a pawn in our way. So that's why we would be moving the bishop up, back, and here. But here it's a lot easier. You can't do that here because there's actually two squares that the king can run to. So while you should know about this kind of maneuver, this is a lot simpler. Checkmate in one. Okay, we have a queen lined up with a king. Very clear that we are going to do something against that king. But what are we going to do? We could just take the knight, and it's a double check. Anytime you see a double check, you know that the king has to move. So that makes our calculation very simple. Why can't I go this way? Because this knight serves a special function. So let's calculate what would happen after the king moved. What if we did go this way? What would happen next? Well, it's a double check. The king has to move. So the only square it could go to would be this square. And if you see a follow-up, you can see the queen could go to the back rank, assisted by that knight. This is what we call coordinating on a square. Very important thing to know. When you can make a piece move such that it coordinates on and attacks the same square twice, typically one of your pieces will go there. I've talked about this in previous puzzle rushes. You want to move pieces so that they attack the same square so that they can join up on that square. And so we would love to go knight here, king over, and then they both attack the same square. Unfortunately, there's a knight there guarding that. That is why we have to go this way. Now there's no knight guarding that square. And this is what I'm talking about with coordination. Do you see how the queen and the knight both touch the same square? Now the queen can go there. It's a coordination move. Always look for coordinating squares. This is a very common type of mate. Uh, it's almost a smothered mate, but the difference is there's some air around the king. We have a whole bunch of squares that are uncovered by white pieces. So the first thing I see is that I see a bishop cuts off two of these. So that leaves one remaining. How can we cover this square? Well, I would love to go here, and I'd love to go here. One of those squares is covered, so it must be the other one. And the funny thing is, these rooks, you don't need them. It looks like these rooks cover that square, but actually the knight will cover that square anyway. Don't need the rooks. Okay. We want to look at targets in this position. Looking at targets is a great way to figure out where mates are. I used to think when you're attacking a king, you want to just like overload all these three squares. And then I found out actually you're only supposed to overload one of them. Why? Because typically the opponent will have pieces that can defend the other squares. You aren't going to have enough to attack all three. But if you focus on one, you can overwhelm the opponent there. And so what we have here, which of these focal points is the most important one? We have a queen attacking the F pawn, but it's defended twice. So when you have one thing attacking something guarded twice, you can ignore it most of the time. You can just ignore this pawn. But I do see that we have 1 and 1 on the H7 square. We have 1 against 0. There's no white pieces attacking G7. So we're not going to look at that. So we want to look at these two guys. How can we make a move that adds firepower to H7? Because if we could just put a queen there, it would be checkmate. How can we do that? Well, I have a bishop, and the bishop does attack that square. So I need to get this knight out of the way. How can we move this knight out of the way such that black has to answer to the knight instead of the attack on H7? If I just move this knight back, like G3, black could just play almost any move here to defend. You could go knight back. They could push the pawn. Anything that guards the square. However, we want to be able to move this knight with tempo, meaning we want to attack something higher than its value. And in that case, we have a king. So we're going to move the knight with attacking the king. Now we have our double attack. This is why targeting is so important. Before it was 1-on-1, so white could not take that pawn. Now it is 2-on-1, and we did it with a tactic. So now we can take it. What we want to try to do here is promote a pawn. Even if we captured all these things but lost our pawn, we wouldn't be winning. This would be a draw by insufficient material. So this is one of those things that's just a straightforward calculation. How can we make sure that our pawn survives? Well, we probably want to take a rook, right? Because if the rook lives, this pawn is never going to get across the line. We just push the pawn, the rook moves, and then we don't have any real way to take it. He's got a pawn that can run up the board as well if we ever move our king. So that leads me to just bishop takes rook. Then what? The king would have to take back. And then from there, it is a pretty simple pawn endgame. The calculation that you should learn is that if you are able to push this pawn onto the head of a king, in other words, directly up against it, like it's coming down on his own head, I call that crowning the king. And if you can crown the king, you will create a queen because queens wear crowns, right? Not just the king. Queen has a crown too. So if you put a crown on the king, you will get a queen. That's the mnemonic we use. Okay? The second one is that a check from a pawn on the 7th rank is a draw. You never want this move to be check. So we never, ever, ever push the pawn such that it is check. If you remember that, if you crown the king, you get a queen. And you remember check on the 7th is a draw. You can figure this one out. So I calculate take. I take the pawn. Only legal move for black is to go back. And then what can I do? Well, I can't move the king forward, so let's try pushing the pawn. And what do we notice? I just put the crown on the king. And what did we say? You put a crown on the king, you get a queen. So let's take. Take. Here's the move. This is the putting the crown on the king. A coronation. If you coronate the king, you will coronate a queen. Now, here's why. We spend our tempo. Anytime there's a pawn that pushed up against a king, the king cannot slide sideways, so it must come out. And that yields control of the queening square. We guard it with our own king. Next move we promote. So remember that. If you put a crown on a king, you get a queen. Or as I call it, a coronation. There will be a coronation. When we attack a king, as we're going to do here, I quickly disregard these rooks because they're undefended, but we don't have anything to attack them with. And everything on the board is a target, it appears. Okay? So we're not going to be able to attack these rooks. But what I do see is that we have a king out in the open. And he can't slip through his pawn fence because it's guarded. So I immediately see this. Now, if you've watched previous videos, you know where our eyes go first. Do they go to the piece that's close to the king? Well, we have a check here and a check here, and we could maybe go over here and take stuff. That is how beginners think. How good players think is they look at the piece who's doing the least. You typically want to start with a piece that is far away. The farther away piece is the one who's doing the least, so you can add the most to its power by investing a move in it. This rook is already working hard. If we move it, it's not improving itself very much. So we have one hardworking rook. If we moved it, we would have one hardworking rook. Let's look at the piece farthest away. I come up. Now I have two hardworking rooks. That's where the win comes from. Though the king would have only one legal move. Back. Now, which piece, in fact, I'll play this because we might as well. Didn't let me show you. Which piece would be the hardest working? Let's go ahead and look at that guy. If I play up and the king goes this way, which piece would be the least working? Well, now the front rook is the one controlling squares around a king. We have a pawn. Excuse me, we have a pawn. We have a pawn. So it's actually this rook. And so what we do is slide this way, and it's checkmate. Look at that on the analysis board. Check. Black's move. Check. King moves. Now this is the piece that is farthest away from the king. 8. All right, we made it through 24. Let's do one more. We want to look for targets. We have one here because it is attacked once and it is not defended. Excuse me, it's defended one time. Still a target. We have a king who is always a target. And we have 1, 2 on a piece that's only defended once. So this is one of those exercises where we try to figure out how much material can we take. We want to take the most material we possibly can. On my side of the board, the rook is hanging. So you might think like, let's take the knight and then we'll take the rook next move. Fortunately, we don't want to do that. First of all, there's a rook there. Second of all, even if we take with the bishop, we'll lose a rook. So we probably just want to take the queen. Now, we would still be down material, I think, if we did that, right? We'd have 2. No, we'd be up a rook. Okay. Let's count the material. 2 minors, 2 minors. Queen and rook, queen and rook. So we're down a rook. All we need to do is win material. It's good to me. And then we should have calculated this earlier. I did, but we want to figure out a way to get the queen out of danger where she cannot be trapped or anything like that. So if we go this way, I think we get the rook coming over, perhaps, and then we can slip out. So what's wrong with this? So the major difference would be, here's a hint for puzzles. It's kind of like a hack, right? Is that there's not much difference between these two squares for me to move the queen to. So you can probably figure that both of those are wrong. Why? Well, the actual reason is because we would be attacked by a rook and the queen would have to leave. And this rook would attack a queen and guard the knight at the same time. Whereas if we go up this way, we reverse that kind of thing. We still attack the knight. It is still trapped in. So it would have to be defended, let's say by the pawn or by the rook. But then we have an attack on the king. And remember, the king is a target. So what I find here is that I have 2 targets and only 2 targets in the position. This rook is defended once and attacked none, so it's not a target. It's defended. This is defended. We have these 2, and technically we have a bishop, and that's it. But I'm not taking the bishop. So we come here. The knight has to be defended, and it's trapped. It can't move. This is a good thing to realize that if a bishop or queen or any diagonal moving piece stands 1, 2, 3 squares away from a knight, it actually covers the entire knight's movement. Covered by the diagonal piece. So what we would then be doing is forking these lines. And now I see that once the rook guards the knight, we have a sneaky little skewer. Ah. The rook would have to come here to defend the pawn. Then we go, oop, and attack the rook again. And the rook would be forced to move again. And then I think we run it out of squares. There's probably even bishop here. I don't think the puzzle is going to make us play that far out. Let's see if I'm right or if I'm missing something. Got it. Yeah. They didn't make us play it out because Black has choices and ways to lose material. If he played that line, he'd get mated. So he has to give up material earlier than that, so the puzzle doesn't make us play it. Okay, we are in check. We only have three reasonable options. Block with the rook because it's defended by the bishop. Block with the bishop because it's defended by the rook. Or move the king. Now, the other feature of this position is that we are mating black. We should probably try to leave all our pieces stationary. Why? We want to keep the bishop in control of the square because the rook can come defend its bishop and attack our king. We want to leave the rook where it is because if it comes back, we don't have any attack on the bishop anymore. And we want to leave our queen, obviously, because we're not going to come back and just lose her. So the chances are we want to leave all the pieces where they are, and we want to move the king. But that's not how we calculate things. We don't just say, oh, I'll move the king, and that's fine. We say, move the king. I'm threatening mate. Black must reply. Can they use the queen to do anything with it? No. They can't even come this way because we're not even going to take the queen. We won't take the queen. We'll just mate. So the queen can't help. They push the pawn. We mate. They must defend the bishop. They can't move the king out of the way. They can't move the bishop, so the rook can't go here. It'll be captured. And it can't go here. And this is the point I was talking about. We'll take it with the queen protected by the bishop. That's the big difference. The square. We're not going to allow the rook to defend the bishop and attack our pieces as well. So we aren't going to retreat and have the queen just move away, and then we have to figure out a way to continue the attack. We're just going to move the king. Now black has to stave off mate, because even if it blocked with the rook, we would take it and take. So we're just going to take a free queen. That's 26 in a row. How can we continue the attack here? Well, I see we have a 1-on-1. I see we have a 1-on-2. So if I go like this, I don't have an attack because the knight is there and the king is there. So that's not an attack. This would be hanging. Black could just take our bishop. And then we haven't gained anything. So what else do we have? We have 2 on 1. So we could try to target this rook. We have an undefended queen. We can target her. We have a king. King is always a target. And that's all we have. This bishop is not a target. Well, I guess it is for a little bit. It's defended by the knight, though. So we have to move our knight out of the way. But we're still only threatening a trade. So one thing to look at would be knight. And now we're double attacking. The only issue is that it's covered. So it doesn't work. But we can look at these other targets, juicier ones. And we can see that I have 2 targets lined up diagonally. What can hit diagonally? Yes, a queen. Yes, a bishop. But turns out a knight can. How? But how? This knight right here is attacking 2 squares that are diagonally touching. And 2 squares that are diagonally touching. And this knight is attacking 2 squares that are diagonals. So actually, a knight can touch 2 squares that are diagonally touching, and that is actually the secret to this tactic. It's a very common one in the Queen's Gambit accepted or the Queen's Gambit declined, because you often get this, what we call a Carlsbad formation. 1, 2, 3 pawns this way, and then typically it's 1, 2, 3 this way. And so this knight, queen, and rook, when the c pawn is missing, tend to have a tactic. Now we have our 2-on-1. Do you see how I targeted this rook by saying it was a 2-on-1? Now all I had to do is figure out a way to reveal more attacks to it. That's it. This is a pawn promotion puzzle. You can tell because I'm promoting pawns, right? Typical. So one thing to realize as a general rule is the 2 pawns on the 6th beat a rook. And so if we could just trade this rook for this knight, we would be winning because 2 pawns beat a rook. They can force themselves to promote by attacking it. We attack it, it moves, we push up, and no matter what it does, we promote on one of the 2 squares that are both guarded by the 2 new pawns. So that's how we would promote this guy. Unfortunately, it doesn't work right away, I don't think, because if we take, we can go And if we attack that rook, like I just said, it'll move with check. And that's the big problem. It's a check. So we do have to be somewhat careful about that. If we push the other pawn, then this pawn becomes frozen. So one thing we could do is ask for help from a neighbor pawn. Take, take, push, 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 queen, and we're too slow. We would like to go here, 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 but we can't. We're too slow. So how to get out of this one? Well, as I said before, we have two targets, right? It's attacked once, defended once, and we have a king as a target. We have a rook that's undefended. So these three are our targets, plus the pawn, which we're not going to worry about right now. Do you see any way we can add firepower to it? The first thing we would want to do would be to check attacking the rook. Let's look at that. Rook moves away somewhere, but then so what? We could push the other pawn. Now the knight is stuck. And if it moves, we could take the rook. So that is an idea. However, the rook doesn't have to go this way. It can go this way. So we can go push a pawn. Rook takes a pawn. And now we don't have, we can take the knight, but now it's a rook against a rook. We have an advanced pawn, but so does black. And to me, that just seems like a draw because the black rook will give itself up for the pawn, and then we'll have to give our rook up for this pawn, and then it's tougher to calculate than what the actual answer is, I think, which is that we're just going to push the other pawn. Instead of attacking the rook first, which we would always like to think about first, we want to attack the pinned piece. So we would want to attack the knight, and if the knight moves, we take the rook, and if the knight doesn't move, we promote. Seems fairly straightforward to me, so I just have to make sure I'm not missing anything. We push. Does the knight move? Knight goes here. I take the rook, and is there any sneaky sort of fork? No. Check. I just move. No problems. Knight is attacked. I'm going to queen. Looks okay to me. So what if the rook moves away? Well, then I just take and I have a queen with check. Rook would take. I would take. I'm winning the game. So that's got to be the answer. Yep. So now I just have to be super careful. Pretty sure I can take the rook, but then I get this check. Then I move away. And then on push, I queen, and it takes, and I come back. And it pushes again, and I come back. And it queens, and I take, and it takes. And I'm losing the pawn race. Very interesting. It'd go fourth rank, it would go fifth rank. And I'm losing the pawn race. Remember earlier I told you all you have to calculate is who crosses the middle first. Black is. Black would queen first. Bad idea. So the alternative is I push this pawn. But then it seems like the rook would take this pawn. And then I would queen, and the knight would take, and the rook would take. So there must be a better answer. Go ahead and take this rook first. And the answer was that the rook doesn't have to give itself up for the knight right away. I can save promotion of that pawn for later. I can stop the pawns first with my own king, invest my time, and then promote my white pawn. We can look at that in the analysis board later, but for now we're going to continue on. Let's see if we can get two more till we get to 30. This is a pawn promotion challenge. So the first thing we want to look at is that the black king cannot leave the box of the white pawn. If it does, then we will able just to run the white pawn, which means that these guys are undefended for now. So what we can do is try the brute force way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. While the black king is going 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But then it's a corner pawn. Here's the rule for corner pawns. If the defending king can get to any of these three squares, it's a draw. It's a draw because either if the king is on f8, either my king has to be on the h file, in which case my pawn cannot push past, or it's not on the h file, it's somewhere else. Doesn't matter where. In which case, king just slides over, goes to the corner, and then it can never be kicked out. So it looks to me like I just go eat all the pawns, and then come on back. Guard f8. So let's calculate. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, Now, the black can waste a tempo pushing the pawn if they want to, but they're not going to. They're going to go here, eat. I'm going to go to f8. I'm going to go to f8. No, you're not. This is the key move you have to know. You have to see that at the end of the chain. I think I have this right. I think I'm going to just go ahead and play it out. I should calculate this more, but I'm trying to move a little bit quicker tonight. Let's see. That's a wasted move, I do believe. So I want to see, because that's not what I calculated, we need to figure this out. This is a common technique, though, in endgames, is to push your pawn up the board, making the other king come back for it, and then it's too far away to do anything about. It takes too long. It takes too many tempi to go get it and come back and guard f8. So what is the typical response would be h4, stopping that pawn from going any farther, and I'm also saving my own self a tempo. So let's calculate, though. Let's just say I don't push the pawn. Typically, the first thing you want to do is ignore pawn moves and continue with your plan. That's the first thing you calculate. So we go 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, and block. Looks okay to me. Well, let's see if I push the pawn. 1, 1, 2, 2. Sorry. 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5. Stops me. So you can see that by putting the tempo into the pawn here, it's the wrong answer because this is a rook pawn. I don't have the time to do that. You may want to do that later if it's a center pawn or if the king is trying to approach from a different side of your own king. In this case, we're trying to shoulder him out. So I do believe I take this pawn. Let me calculate one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But it's my move, so I get there first. Now we're just going to take that, right? Because he wasted a tempo, so I can waste a tempo. Now it's a race to f8. They don't show you the educational moments. Only I do. So that's why you got to watch these instead of doing them all yourself. So we can all learn together. This is an unfortunate looking position for black. Black has a uh, black has a very tenuous guard on these pawns here, but because of the backward nature of this a pawn, I guess that's the h pawn since we're black. The h pawn we can take and queen first. We have to be very careful about this. That is the move that is coming from white. Push, and we are forced to take because if we don't, they just run all the way to queening and we can't stop them. So even if we tried with our king, these guys would just get mopped up. So we can't do that. So it seems pretty clear to me that I'm not going to put my king in a box, lose a pawn. So this appears to be my only option that doesn't just immediately lose this pawn. But I'm pretty sure the lesson here is going to be I queen first. So I go here, white, take, here, here. Again, we learned previously, I don't actually calculate this. I just see that black is the first one to cross the center line before white. So here's my two move calculation. Ready? Here, here. That's my two moves. And I automatically know, because the black pawn has crossed the line unhindered, that it is going to queen first. So I just immediately say queen, queen, my move. I go here, and that's checkmate. So if you just know these ways to calculate a little bit faster and you skip ahead, you can calculate this too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Mate and 6 happens instantaneously if you just know the rules. So let's see what happens. By the way, it's the only legal move. I should have mentioned that because this pawn push changed the position such that white has no legal moves. This is a forced mate. There it is. And now we're just going to promote and then we're going to checkmate. See, told you. I queen right first and then out. Haha. I like this one. Here, here, mate would be nice, except there's a bishop and also two other pieces attacking. So we can't do that. The first thing we want to do, though, is check the material. Queen and queen, rook, 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 bishop, knight, bishop, knight. So we're down, single bishop. We don't have any pawns for it. It's 5 on 5. So we have to win probably a rook or more. So let's check the targets. This is a target. Also, it's a big hint that it's the piece that moved last. So what has changed in the position? Well, these, because there used to be a knight here, these squares are less defended than they were before, which should be a huge, huge, huge hint. We'll come back to that. So we want to finish doing the process. Let's look at all the targets. Okay, let's start from the left and go to the right. This is a one-on-one, so it's a target. And the king is always a target, so that's two. We have 2 on 1, so this is a target. What else? We have this pawn, which is defended 3 times, attacked once, not a target. A bishop. This is almost a trap technique, but it isn't. We'd love to go here and trap the bishop, but actually it's not. There's an escape square here, and also that's just hanging. We'll cover that in a later puzzle, probably. So, continuing with targets, we have almost a rook, but not quite. It's defended twice by queen and rook, and only attacked once, not a target, which really, really, really shortens our search space, guys. We have 3 targets plus this knight, which we mentioned earlier. 3 targets. 3 on the king side, and then the knight. So this should be a super simple calculation for anybody. If you just do this targeting technique, you can avoid being distracted by all of this business. None of this matters. This is the only thing that matters. So all we're really going to need to do is look at checks and captures, and look at that. We have a check and a capture. And because we noted the targets, even the pawns, we were able to find this almost immediately. I originally wanted to take here, and the very next thing I looked at was taking here and taking here. And so this was a super quick find. So what we're going to do is check. And then this is called, do you remember from earlier, a bump and run. We bump the king over so that the queen can move over 2 squares and stand on top of the king. We would have loved to go here originally, but we couldn't because there's a bishop there and we couldn't reach it. So bump, then run. All right, folks. That's 31 puzzles. We're starting to get into the high ones now. I hope this was useful for somebody. If you haven't seen these kind of tactics, if you haven't seen the way to think them through, if you don't understand the targeting method, really appreciate comments telling me on how I can tell you these things better, what I can explain better, what you've already seen, what you're sick of hearing. Let me know, and we're going to pick this up in the next video, see if I can get to my coveted 50.